Welcome. I'm Alex Cardell, your NCN host for this event, and I am so happy to welcome Howard, our very own NCN member, to share with some of the information he has gleaned from his research and studies. So just gonna take it away, Howard.
Well, thanks to those of you that showed up today. This is actually one of my concerns is that this doesn't seem to resonate with a lot of people yet or something. But I'll proceed with uh, I'll share my screen and so one of the central points that I wanted to share was that it's not just global warming that's serious right now. And as I put under the subtext or the subtitle there is global warming is a symptom of ecological overshoot. Uh, Global warming is actually a pollution problem. Like it's the pollution of CO2 from our like consumption lifestyle that's creating the global warming. And so the central point here is it's overshoot is really what we need to be, like focusing on rather than addressing the symptoms. So I'll just read some of these things. The climate crisis is just one symptom of our underlying overshoot crisis. What is overshoot? Too many people consuming and polluting too much beyond the carrying capacity. So that what we're exceeding actually the carrying capacity of the Earth's ecosystem, exceeding the biogenerative and assimilative like capacity of the ecosphere. Signs of overshoot. Globally, we consume and generate waste that requires the equivalent of 1.75 Earths to process. The human population is nearly 8 times larger than it was at the beginning of the fossil fuel age and has been growing nearly 20 times faster. Biomass shifts. 1%, like the Industrial Revolution, there was 1% humans, 99% wild animals. Or now it's 96% humans and domestic livestock and 4% wild species. We've killed off that much of the wild species on the earth due to the expansion of humanity. Non-human species declines between 1970 and 2012, 81% of freshwater, 36% of marine life, 37% terrestrial. Climate change, a pollution problem, exists alongside myriad other pollution and over-exploitation problems that are symptoms of overshoot, like biodiversity loss, deforestation, ocean acidification, soil erosion, desertification, water scarcity, etc. This next one is simply just kind of a review of that. I'll just go to the second one here is fixing the climate change will not fix overshoot. However, fixing overshoot would reverse climate change and address all other significant symptoms. I have to move this out of the way here. So recently, this study came out from this Science Direct group, which is a group of 28, of the world's scientists with led by this fellow Johan Rockström. He's a Swedish scientist, and they determined that I'll read it here. Planetary boundaries demarcate a safe operating space for humanity beyond which the Earth system state is characterized by increased risk and a compromised ability to sustain human society. Such boundaries have been identified for the following 9 processes: biosphere integrity, climate change, ocean acidification, stratospheric ozone depletion, biochemical nitrogen and phosphorus cycling, global freshwater use, land system change, chemical pollution, and atmospheric aerosol loading. So, and this is a chart they put out in literally, it's moving this fast with this increased population. In 2009, we had only crossed three of these boundaries. By 2015, it was four, and now in 2023, we've crossed six of the nine boundaries for, for sustainable life for humanity and other species. So this is my first of the three presentations, the next Sunday and the following Sunday. So today I was going to focusing on, replacing fossil fuels with renewable energy and the energy situation, which is referred to that we are energy blind, essentially. We're not really very aware as humanity is like how dependent we are on fossil fuels. So I call this the big lie. Investing in renewable energy is the solution. And this is why I feel like not understanding this is why a lot of people aren't really paying attention to this and aren't really interested. And it has to do with this. The mainstream media's focus strictly on climate change while ignoring overconsumption and overpopulation distracts the public's attention away from endless growth, which then enables business as usual, continual overconsumption. If you look at any of the articles on global warming, they basically never mention, overpopulation or overconsumption. So essentially, the news that we're getting, the public's getting, is don't worry about, whether there's population or a consumption because we're investing in renewables and that's going to take care of the problem. But it's actually taking our eyes off of the actual underlying problem that's creating this. And here's an example. This is a chart showing 50 years of the climate conferences that we've had. And this is what's happened to CO2. These 33 climate conferences haven't changed the direction of the CO2 increasing over that time. It just continually keeps going up, despite all these climate conferences that they were having. So another part of this is you can see down here at the bottom, what we're trying to do is move to electrics, okay? But passenger cars are only this small portion of where the CO2 is coming from. To make cement, and chemicals, all these other iron and steel requires a great deal of fossil fuels for heating up and burning and, melting all these things. So these are the different portions, like trucks with diesel fuel is this other portion. But so if we're just focusing on electric cars, it's only like 15% of the CO2. So how is just going to electric cars going to affect the amount of CO2 going into the atmosphere if all these other areas, aren't addressed? Actually, while I'm here, I just want to mention my friend John there. I was at another presentation I did, and John's was doing some, I don't know if John's still involved with trying to get solar in his area, but John asked me, well, here I am kind of criticizing, in a sense, that renewables aren't going to be the answer, but renewables are a better option to what we're doing right now. It's just that they're not going to solve the climate crisis, and they dig up quite a bit of the ecosystem. They're not really renewable. they're rebuildable, and it's the sun and the wind that are renewable, but not the solar panels and the wind farms that we create. That's not renewable. Those only last 25 to 30 years, and they need to be redone, or like those all go in the trash, and then new ones have to be made by digging up more of the ecosystem. So here's something I didn't know till I started researching this. This is a barrel of oil that gets heated up. And so if we're looking to go to electric cars, when you heat up a barrel of oil, this top portion, these top area, this comes off the barrel of oil first. So if we stop using the gas in the lighter things like we still have to boil these barrels of oil to get the other fuels, and to get diesel fuel, we have to go further down we have to boil out more of the top lighter stuff to get to the diesel. So just cutting back on gas isn't going to cut back on the use of barrels of oil. You still, and at the bottom parts, you're getting asphalt and all the other uses that we have for oil. So it's, again, it's not, cutting down on the use of gas isn't going to cut down on the use of, of barrels of oil. And these are things that, we're not being told in the media. We're just, it's just, relax. We're investing in renewables. There's no problem. Don't worry. Just keep consuming the way you're consuming so that the profits can keep coming in for the corporations. So here's some issues with solar panels. The so-called renewable energy technologies being sold as solutions to climate change aren't renewable and will exacerbate overshoot. Solar panels, high-tech wind turbines, hydrogen cells, nuclear, large-scale hydropower, and every other you-name-it technology that will supposedly save the day, number one, are impossible to build and maintain without fossil fuel, require other renewable metals and minerals that have been vastly depleted and whose extraction entails significant ecological destruction and social injustices. They have a short lifespan, necessitating continual replacement in perpetuity and generating tons of waste that cannot be waved away by the mythical wand of industrial circular economy. Now, here's some other issues with solar panels. Manufacturing solar panels uses toxic substances, large quantities of energy and water, and produces toxic byproducts. Mono and polycrystalline solar panels require high temperatures at every step of their production. For example, temperatures of 2,700 degrees to 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit, 1,500 to 2,000 centigrade, are needed to transform silicon dioxide into metallurgical grade silicon. Up to half of the silicon is lost in the wafer sawing process. For every 1 megawatt of solar panels it produced, about 1.4 tons of toxic substances, including hydrochloric acid, sodium hydroxide, sulfuric acid, nitric acid, and hydrogen fluoride, and 2,868 tons of water are used, while 8.6 tons of emissions are released, 8.1 tons of which are the perfluorinated compounds, sulfur hexafluoride, nitrogen trifluoride, hexafluoroethane, that are thousands of times more potent than CO2. Other toxic byproducts, such as trichlorosilane gas, silicone tetrachloride, and dangerous particulates from the wafer sawing process are also produced. Amorphous, thin film solar panels are made with cadmium, which is a carcinogen and genotoxin. The actual performance of installed solar panels is problematic. The efficiency rates of solar panels are low, on the average about 15 to 20%, and are almost always less than the manufacturers advertise. As far as this 15 to 20% is, the sun's not up all the time. It's not like the current use of fossil fuels where every time you turn on your switch, the electricity works. This is why they have to have the big batteries, for the backup, because wind and sun aren't always available 24/7 like our current electrical system is. So there's some more facts here. Transitioning the U.S. electrical supply away from fossil fuels by 2050 would require a grid construction rate 14 times that of the rate over the past half century. The actual installed costs for a global solar program would have totaled roughly 252 trillion, about 13 times the US GDP a decade ago, and considerably more today. A recent report describing what what would be needed to achieve 90% decarbonization and electrification by 2035 neglects to mention that in order to meet such targets, the United States would have to quadruple its last annual construction of wind turbines every year for the next 15 years and triple its last annual construction of solar photovoltaics every year for the next 15 years, only to repeat the process indefinitely since solar panels and wind turbines have average lifespans of around 15 to 30 years. So now here's some on electric cars. Replacing the world's projected fleet of 2 billion vehicles is going to require an explosive increase in mining. Global annual extraction of neodymium and dysprosium will go up by 70%. Annual extraction of copper will more than double, and cobalt will need to increase by a factor of almost 4, all for the entire period now between now and 2050. We need to switch to electric cars, yes, but ultimately we need to radically reduce the number of cars we use. Take silver, for example. Mexico is home to the Peñasquito mine, one of the biggest silver mines in the world, covering nearly 40 square miles. The operation is staggering its scale, a sprawling open cast complex ripped into the mountains, flanked by 2 waste dumps, each a mile long, and a tailings dam full of toxic sludge held back by a wall 7 miles around and as high as a 50-story skyscraper. This mine will produce 11,000 tons of silver in 10 years before its reserves, the biggest in the world, are gone. Now, here's the central point I wanted to make. To transition the global economy to renewables, we need to commission up to 130 more mines on the scale of Peñasquito, just for silver. So this huge mine, we need to commission another 130 of these. So I have a picture of this one. This is what the Peñasquito mine looks like. So we need 130 more of these to scale up to the amount of cars they're suggesting we need to produce. Now so that was silver. Now this is another mine, the Atacama Desert in Chile, like where a lot of the world's copper is, and lithium is the world's driest desert, and there are parts where you never detect kind of had any rainfall. And so where's the water coming from? A lot of it's coming from underground aquifers where it's been locked up there. You're mining the water. You're mining the water in order to help you refine the copper and the lithium. So again, that the environmental consequences, I think, are one of the biggest obstacles for net zero. It's not necessarily the technology. Well, we can have that conversation, but I think one of the biggest obstacles is that you're running into deep reluctance among the people who live near the resources that need to give you the resources. And it's been pretty easy thus far, but a lot of people there, when I talk to people in the town near that mine, they're terrified about arsenic levels in the ground and in the air. They're fearful about, terrified about the kind of respiratory diseases that they're encountering in young people there. And that's just the beginning of it. You've got problems with the tailings dam. Okay, for this particular mine, so that's the toxic waste dump. Basically, it's not majorly toxic, but it's still toxic. The tailings dam for Chiquimata, and bear in mind, they only really started putting this stuff into a dam a few decades ago. Before that, they just put it into rivers and let it run down into the sea. It was terrible. The tailings dam is bigger than Manhattan. That's the toxic waste dump for this single mine. Okay, and if we are going to fulfill net zero, we need another 3 of these mines every year between now and net zero. And I have a picture of that one too. There's another one. And see these trucks down here? Here's what they look like. And see the people up here? This is what we've been able to do with fossil fuels too. With this new energy source, we're able to build these monstrous, like trucks that can carry out tons and tons of material. So that's my renewable section. Now I'm going to go into what I'm calling energy blind. Prior to fossil fuels, and the first official oil well was drilled in, I think it was 1869. So 150, 60 years ago, we started drilling oil wells. And this is the fossil fuel age, where prior to this massive energy source, we did work by human work and by horses, essentially. So we're plowing the fields with these horses and stuff. So, but 1 barrel of oil contains 5,000 or 5,700,000 BTUs, or 1,700 kilowatts of work potential. But here's the easier to understand thing. It takes an average person 4.5 years to generate the amount of work that 1 barrel of oil does. We're living in an anomaly of human history, where the fossil fuel age. So in addition to this, the amount of energy that would takes to fly, like a jet airliner, is equivalent to 100,000 horses. So we didn't have that kind of energy prior to the fossil fuel age, but now we're able to create all of this monstrous technology and stuff due to this source. So I wanted to. This is another interesting thing I learned, that basically if our general metabolic rate, which means like how much energy we use as a human each day, if we're just, if we're not doing anything strenuous, it's like equal to like 100 watts, like a 100-watt light bulb. We use about that much energy, which is, approximately 2,000 food calories per day. If you start doing a lot of strenuous work, it goes up to like 2,000 or 3,000 watts maybe. So that's all the energy would use. Now, but there's something else going on in this fossil fuel age. I'll read the third paragraph here. To have the energy that was used to make the laptop, to have this office, to produce all those books, to have an automobile, a home, all this stuff that's part of me, we think of it as actually me, and it's you. If you add all that up, you ask, how big is that? It's not 100 watts. It's not even 200 or 300 watts. If you're an American, it's about 11,000 watts. Our social metabolic rate is about 100 times what our natural basal metabolic rate is. So it is a chart that shows, so this is if we were just prior to the fossil fuel age, without all this technology, if we were just moving around doing this, we'd use about 100 watts. If we were out in the field, plowing with our horse, maybe using up 250, like watts. But given all of this technology, all of this stuff around us that we're using that we didn't have prior to fossil fuel age, so individually we're responsible for 11,000 watts of energy. And this is daily, 11,000 watts of energy due to all of this external stuff we have. So that means that's all of this stuff, that all of these things that weren't available prior to fossil fuels, they're available now, and we're using that energy thanks to these barrels of oil that can do 4.5 years of human labor. So here's where we're living. 300,000 years ago, none of this was there. That it took, like we're living in this carbon pulse age that's reaching a peak, and it's going to start going down because we're reaching peak oil and peak gases coming soon. So here's a smaller scale that shows. So here around 1800, when we started discovering we're using coal and oil, actually oil didn't become our main source of energy until about 1940. So this is the age that we're living in that's completely different than any other age of human history. And so what happens when we got this, like this pulse, this carbon pulse, this all of these graphs are going to look like this. It looks like a hockey stick. Here's where we, started using oil, and the population went from 1 billion, took 250,000 years to reach 1 billion. And then in the span of 200 years, we went up to, like 8 billion. And not surprisingly, the GDP, which is completely dependent on this oil source of energy, it also goes up like a hockey stick. We're using more and more energy like this. So this, what's called tight oil here, that's the same thing as the shale oil, the fracking oil. So what happened was, see, the standard oil, or conventional oil, they call it, it peaked in 1970, and this is showing the conventional oil is depleting, and this is the Alaska oil. It's also going down with, but we were able to keep up with the energy because we started all this fracking, which fracking is literally drilling down and putting explosives into, and breaking up the rock so that the like the trapped oil in the rock, not the conventional oil is the pools of oil, and the fracking oil is trying to get the smaller uh, sources that not smaller than the big pools. It's trying to release the oil that's stuck in between the rock. And going to this actually more expensive procedure is the way we were able to keep continuing to have enough of the oil source to keep the economy, like running at the level that it's running. So this shows here, this is where the current energy, where we're getting the energy to run the economy. This is how much of coal, how much of oil, this is gas. And then here's the solar and wind up here, these little tiny slivers up here. And another thing that happens is whenever we create more sources of energy from solar and wind, it doesn't decrease the use of the oil and the gas and the coal. It just gets added on top to it, and to keep running the economy. It's not depleting the amount of fossil fuels that we're using. So here, if we look at these, right here around 1943, between 1943 and 2010, we've used 90% of fossil fuels that have been consumed in that period. So as that peak was going up on fossil fuels, because of the size of the population going up to 8 billion from 1 billion, we're using it faster and faster and faster. In simply we use 50% of all the oil we've consumed, since 1991. So we're using it up extremely fast now. So despite this line here, this energy intensity, it's actually referring to how efficient we've gotten, more and more efficient at using energy better. but it's going, even though we've increased in efficiency by 36%, the consumption of energy is still is gone up by 63%. So our efficiency isn't saving us. So. And this is what we currently are, where we're importing oil from, all these different countries. In Russia, which is down here in this orange, it stops right over here, like around the time Russia invades Ukraine, and we stop importing from there. But we're importing oil from all these different countries to keep our economy running. And if you ever wondered why we're in the Middle East or why we have militaries, all over the Middle East, this is where 50% of the world's remaining oil is, which keeps our economy running. And here's this is the percentage of world oil, that these per country. I left out, there's a whole bunch of smaller ones, but these are the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the US is number 11 in this. We have 2.1% of the world's oil. And so Alex asked me to offer a few recommendations. And this, again, this is just the first of 3 sections. I'm going to go into more of those other, like the areas where we've exceeded the carrying capacity. But the number one thing, this is somebody else's pointers, but is educate yourself. This is why I do these slideshows, is because I'd like to more people to be aware of the situation that we're in and how serious it is. And so the second one, individuals have limited capacity, but collectively we have great capacity. The number one, if someone asks me what should I do, it's talk to your friends and neighbors, educate, learn, explore. This information's available. In fact, there's a couple of really great sources. I should probably type that into the chat. You need to become politically engaged. Like the more people start contacting their representatives and saying, what are we doing about overshoot? What about population? What about, consumption? Isn't that where, the pollution is coming from, the CO2? What are we doing to cut back there? We don't have decades. See, we're already experiencing difficulties with climate and with overshoot, and it's going to be more and more serious as it goes on. The oil is going to become more and more expensive because these, actually, let me just read these last couple and then I'll get out of share screen. We need to have a common understanding of our future. We have an obligation to share what we know. So I guess what I wanted to mention is that this oil, as the oil gets more, as we start going down past the peak and using it fast, it gets to a certain point to where it costs more money to try to extract it than it's worth. So it's not going to go all the way down that carbon pulse. It's only going to go part of the way down, and then it's going to get so expensive. And I guess one other thing that I don't think everybody knows is that electricity, we're using these renewables for like cars and wind, and so that's the use of fossil fuels is only 18 to 20% for electricity. So the renewables are focusing on like electricity, and that other 80% of what we're using oil for to run the economy, is not being accounted for. There are people working on hydrogen and other things to try to replace like diesel fuel and things like that. But it's less efficient. This oil is there's no uh, replacement for this at the how energetic and transportable and all it is, so, and it runs the entire economy. And soon as that gets more and more expensive, everything gets more expensive. More and more people can't afford, to drive or to do things, so and this is again just a couple of the issues about what we're facing, and which is really a polycrisis, or some people call a meta crisis. And you're not getting this information from the media. And my point of view, it's probably literally it's an existential crisis. It's a world crisis. And the, the, the leaders of the countries in the world should really be getting together, and seeing that they're all facing this, challenge. And I've, I think in my third section, I'm going to talk about degrowth, or the some of the alternatives to the situation that we're in that we can move towards. So thanks for listening. And I don't know if there's questions or just comments or anything or dialogue, anything anyone wants to do.
Yeah, I think we can just unmute if people have a question or a comment.
Hopefully, is that the question?
I'm just asking if you're hopeful.
No.
Okay.
Uh,
Then we're on the same page.
I see. I had no, but I'll tell you, I actually I have two kids and five grandchildren, and I was really hesitant to present this to them, but I felt like, it's best that they, have somewhat of an understanding of what might be coming. So I did show it to them, and the more I looked at it, I found, as sad as the situation might be, because I actually feel like a significant portion of the population is going to die off. I mean, I literally feel that that's a fact. But perhaps this situation is I think it could, just like COVID, but even more so, it could force people to see, wow, we're all in this together. We're on this same planet. And the sensible thing would be to cooperate rather than look at each other as adversaries. So I think there's a good possibility that, the people that remain and that go through this hardship or something could come out with a different outlook and start, creating sustainable communities and cooperating, working together. So I'm hopeful in that sense that those people that remain, because right now, when people talk about, well, let's go to Mars or somewhere else, they're going to take that same crazy mindset with them and then just destroy the next place or something, So perhaps this can be like a wake-up call for humanity to start creating a different culture, that's based on cooperation and based on the fact of where our common humanity, not all these made up differences of thought or something, so I'm hopeful in that sense that the future generations, the people that are left, could maybe start living sanely and stop destroying the earth. And so, because essentially, when we dig up stuff, we take a living earth and turn it into dead stuff.
Howard, what will bring this sanity about?
Well, so I was suggesting that seeing that, that it would, we're literally all on this same planet. Why are we calling ourselves, like a Russian American? We're human beings, and seeing also that we're destroying the ecosystem. That's, we get our food and water and air, from, so how do we, when it's like now it's forcing us to pay attention to where, everything's coming, how we stay alive, what makes us thrive and what makes us perish or something, that's going to be right in everyone's face or something. Now we're able to just you walk out your front door and you go, what's the problem? I don't see a problem. You can just keep going through the routines and until something starts to collapse. So it's going to be collapsing around the globe, and it's going to be an opportunity. It's going to be that situation to when humans actually change, when the pain gets so, intense, then they go, what's going on here? So I see that as coming more and more, like one of the issues that comes up for me with my two kids is apparently something like 66% of Americans feel they're living paycheck to paycheck. And that's has to do with this. It's tied to this cost of energy and other things. I'm not sure if I'm going to touch the banking system because the banking system's a big part of this mess too.
Yeah, and inequality, I mean, is a huge,
Mhm.
huge part of it, I think. You have people who really are doing, like as you mentioned, paycheck to paycheck, or in underdeveloped countries, just doing what they can to survive.
And of course, all of these, basically the majority of these mines are overseas and in other countries. So we're devouring the ecosystems. And again, like I said, toxic things. You can see these pictures of what, digging up cobalt where they have like teenagers or young kids, digging this toxic material out of the ground so that we can keep our economy running.
Of course, those in power want to keep us from understanding the effect of our lifestyles having on people in other countries, so that we can kind of just obliviously consume, and think that we're not affecting or hurting anybody. Yeah, it's very rare that you hear anything about the impact on other countries and other peoples in the media. That's all.
Yeah, my question or discussion was around around this problem of consumerism that you're talking about. Do you think some kind of government policing or somehow enforcing things like forcing people to use less, is that the solution? And then, of course, in that situation, then who's the government? Who are they representing? If they're representing the Wall Street, do we want them to have more force or not? Or should we just let the natural and economical equilibrium happen? And as you said, oil becomes more expensive, people cannot drive anymore, and somehow maybe a new equilibrium will happen.
My prediction is as this energy source gets more and more depleted, they will start doing things like that, but ideally for me is like, which I think is Stephen's approach and for doing dialogue is where you can learn together. You can learn that you can learn that it makes so much more sense to work together, and you can see that we have a common humanity. We all would like to, like live well and not live in fear or not live in poverty. We all have this same human interests. And so the ideally it would be through seeing, wow, we need to cooperate and change and change our lifestyles, and otherwise you always have all that friction that comes with the imposing a law. I mean, but I do feel like as things get as the fossil fuels become, or as the whole situation becomes more problematical, I feel like we will start imposing certain behaviors. But ideally, it would be better to come through cooperation rather than force.
Makes sense. Yeah. As you said, COVID is a good example, I guess, that kind of crisis will cause both. Like some people will start cooperating and the government start imposing.
Yeah.
Yeah, although, the idea of government, I mean, doing, I think a lot of people, like you were talking about, appeal to your government or whatever. I mean, basically, that's a tough one, especially given, our government is kind of bought and sold. Yeah, I've often wondered about, back when I was in my teens, I wanted to go live in a commune, and now they call it an intentional community. And it's always been a item of interest for me, except, when you look at the realities, people who really work on doing this, that's where it's trying, people want, I was meeting with a group of people who wanted to, who weren't happy with current economy, and they wanted to share, versus, hoarding. But it's like really, swimming upstream with our laws and everything. So, and I think some communities have been able to come up with creative solutions around that, to be able to create communities where they can live and share. So, but I don't know, Howard, you may be addressing some of this stuff like solutions later on, right?
Yeah, I was gonna, there's a, movement called degrowth movement, and that's probably going to be scary to most people, because so the solution here is to stop consuming so much, stop digging so much of the ecosystem. And as we cut back on consuming, so what happens to the businesses? What happens, so they start laying off people. The economy starts collapsing, because then if you don't have a job, then you don't pay your loan, or if your company goes out of business. So the banks start folding too. And we've seen in not too distant past of what happens if a bank starts folding and they have to bail out the bank, and the government then doesn't have any money, then they can't pay. I mean, so the whole economy can be, this is why, can, just implode on itself, so, but this is why I wanted to show it to my kids or something to, so that there is, we could, if this is done cooperatively, it can avoid a lot of the hardship, like we would need things like they were talking about a universal income, or or universal free healthcare. You change cooperatively, you could do things, all of this profit doesn't have to go up to a few billionaires and stuff, the economic system is going to have to change radically. I'm going to touch a little bit on this GDP stuff with this, it just means growth. And essentially, again, for that 250,000 years before we hit the 1 billion, the idea of growth was not an issue. It's just this fossil fuel age where it's all about growing the economy. Because if you don't keep growing, then it starts contracting, and then you have more and more people that can't afford living, especially with the distribution of wealth. Yeah.
Well, as you were saying, and we are kind of drawing to time here. Well, we've got 2 more sessions to dive deeply into this. So, but as you were saying, potentially as the population decreases, that's going to decrease consumption, just because there aren't going to be as many people to buy products, right? So one might hope that if that's happening in kind of like a soft landing, then maybe the whole thing could take a bit of a soft landing. But I think your point is really well taken, that if we don't start cooperating and operating, understanding that we're basically on one planet, that's going to be a problem.
Howard, I see you going in a direction that I'm thinking, but I want to just offer a couple of thoughts. One is, you painted a very severe, extreme set of charts a moment ago about what it would take to get to net zero. We don't have to get to net zero. We don't have to do that tomorrow, the next day, or ever. We're all going to be using fossil fuel products for the next 10 generations. There are things out there in the medical field, in the industrial field, where we need to use those. What we don't need to do is push 2, 4, 5,000 pounds of metal down the road with fossil fuels with one little, this is John talking, one little small lady going to buy her groceries. That's what we don't need to do. But net zero, we will always be inhaling dust, dirt, particles. It's a little bit like smoking. If you only smoke an average of 1 cigarette a week, there's a very good chance that your body can handle that. It's just that we're getting to the point where we're smoking 2 packs a day in some areas. The body can't handle that. Howard, this whole system called America, the game is consumption based. If we step out and say, we're going to reduce consumption, stop consuming, then we become the enemy of the system. It's a consumer-based society, government, media, all of that. All of that is constantly conditioning us, encouraging us. Presidents have sent us checks when they thought the economy, when the consumption is going down a little bit, everybody gets a check for $1,000 with a note, spend, spend, spend. So we got to keep in mind that we're in a game, in a system that's all geared toward consumption. Howard, you're right. I'm a little bit more optimistic about solar. It's only one tool in the tool shed, one screwdriver in a box of tools. But I'll offer you another statistic. First of all, solar is the source of life for all life. Solar created the fossil fuels. Everything you see that's alive is coming from solar. There's everything you're eating, everything is solar based. And let me get this as clearly as I can. I made a note a moment ago. In 1 hour, enough solar strikes the planet to fuel the entire planet's fuel needs, the entire Earth's needs for fuel and energy, enough for driving our cars, running our factories, enough solar energy strikes the planet in one day to fuel all that the planet needs for a year. It's just right now, a lot of that's being captured by, the trees, the vegetation, and a huge amount of it just goes uncaptured. I know what it's like to have solar panels that provide the electricity, the fuel for my car and for my home. Yes, mine are warranted for 25 years, but there are panels out there that were put up in the 70s that are still generating electricity at a much lower efficiency rate. So yes.
John, maybe you can leave me a little time to respond.
Okay, I can stop there, other than I jokingly say to my friends, I've heard gas is up to maybe $2.50 a gallon now, maybe a little higher. What is it like at the pumps? Because I don't burn gasoline unless I take a long trip.
Okay, I don't question that all the energy comes from the sun, but we're depleting all of this fossil fuels that's running everything. The air that again is just a symptom, like the cars are just 15%, of like of this pollution stuff, all the other stuff, the concrete, all the rest of the running civilization. So what I'm saying, so actually I'm fine with everybody being skeptical and checking this out for themselves, but I'm going to do my best to show that we got two choices coming: soft landing or hard landing. Okay, whether we're, excuse me for that,
Yeah.
whether we're, like uh, in a consumption society or not, or whether we got lots of energy coming from the sun, this civilization is going to implode, and we got a choice of meeting it cooperatively or fighting with each other. It's coming. It's whether I'm saying that energy isn't going to take the place of the energy that came from those fossil fuels, from those material dying over millions of years, becoming fossil fuels. That's not going to be available. And so I'm saying, well, let me just say what I just said. If you look closer, collapse is coming, whether or not the sun's still shining. The civilization is going to, like reduce. We're going to have to live much simpler, regardless of whether the sun's still shining. But help yourself. I mean, do the research. I mean, I'm going to do my best in the next two presentations to show that it's going to be really difficult in the next few decades.
Well, on that super positive note, I just want to reinforce that, like Howard said, I mean, I do believe this is a wake-up call, just like the shutdown around that we experienced, a few years ago. And I think what came out of that shutdown and what hopefully will come out of this is that just a renewed sense of connection between people and cooperation. That's my hope.
And I want to thank all of you too. Thanks for coming, it's hopefully you'll talk to your friends.